meet the aspirations of the October 17th movement. And Lebanese Diaspora Action, one of the partners in this is our Washington, D.C. group, which I am part of. So hi, welcome to the webinar. And we're partnering with Impact Lebanon for this.
Hi, my name is Daniela Chartouni. I'm a member of Impact Lebanon. Impact Lebanon is basically an initiative hub aimed at promoting active citizenship through a collaboration between the diaspora and local entities to drive incremental change in Lebanon. We are a platform that allows active members and those who wish to become active to bring their ideas and tap into a community and resources to make them happen. The strength of Impact Lebanon is in connecting people who share similar aims and complement each other's expertise to make an initiative a success. Our initiatives have ranged from fundraising, development initiatives, including the Environment Academy, which is partnered with AUB, awareness raising initiatives, which include webinars and seminars like this one, and most recently, a really exciting initiative, which I'm a part of, called Dekene, which is an online concept store that aims to support Lebanese talent by providing them with a global platform. So if this is interesting, check our website, impactlebanon.org, and join an initiative or maybe suggest a new one. Next, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Dalal Mawad, who is a journalist with the Associated Press. She's currently working as a senior Middle East and North Africa video producer with AP. She has previously worked as a regional video producer for the United Nations Refugee Agency, covering displacement in the Middle East and in the world. She has extensively covered Kafala, working as a local reporter for 2 years with LBCI. So with that, I'd like to give the floor to Dalal. Thank you.
Yes, hi everyone, and first of all, thank you for asking me to moderate this panel, and I want to thank everyone for joining this discussion tonight. Impact Lebanon, Lebanese Diaspora in Action, and Meghterbin Mejtemiin. So tonight's discussion is I'm going to be joined by a panel of activists and experts on Kafala. And I have with me already, we have Dipendra Upreti. Dipendra actually is known, to be behind a famous online platform. This is Lebanon, which has been in the past few years giving a voice to migrant workers and domestic workers in Lebanon and shedding light on abuses related to the kafala system. He himself worked in Lebanon in the hospitality sector. And he later on moved to Canada, where he is right now, and he's joining us from Canada. Hi, Dipendra. Nice to have you here. And Dipendra and his wife, whom he met in Lebanon, have been actively working on, promoting the rights of migrant domestic workers, fighting against kafala through This is Lebanon. And we also have with us Rahav Dandash. Rahav is a human rights activist, a feminist. She's been very active in the protests and in the revolution since October, and she's the coordinator of the Migrant Community Center in Beirut with the anti-racism movement organization ARM. And of course, she's been working on kafala and on migrant domestic workers in Lebanon in general, and the broader issue of racism, of course. We'll be later joined by Nizar Saghiye, who is the co-founder and executive director of the Legal Agenda. I believe that Nizar is a bit late. Some of you might already know Nizar because he's always on television. He is a leading lawyer, a human rights activist, and researcher who's been very vocal about social injustice, about human rights issues. And he is currently a legal consultant with the ILO on labor reform, including women migrant domestic workers. And he's going to be bringing in the legal perspective, I hope. Now, how is this going to happen? So I'm going to be asking our panelists some questions. It's going to be more of a conversation. You're all welcome to ask questions. So what we want you to do is to put the questions in the Q&A box, which you see down at the right, and not in the chat box. And then I'm going to be filtering the questions. And what you can do is, if you see a question that you wanted to ask and that's been already asked, you can like it. And the more a question gets liked, the higher the priority it's going to be given. And so I'll be asking that question first, but we'll leave the Q&A till the end. We're going to start with the discussion, of course. So as you guys know, the Kafala system is not something that was born today. This is a system that's been put in place a long time ago, and it's existed for decades. Now, there's a resurgence in the debate around Kafala recently, and we've seen an increase in the number of, media reports, panels, debates about that, mainly because of the double crisis that Lebanon is going through. On the one hand, the unprecedented financial and economic crisis that we're witnessing, which is kind of putting an economic pressure on that system, because a lot of households can no longer afford paying their domestic workers, or are paying them in Lebanese pounds, not at the adjusted exchange rate. As you all know, the Lebanese pound has lost more than 80% of its value. And we've seen the tragic scenes in front of embassies, such as the Ethiopian embassy, women who want to be repatriated, who are demanding, to go back home, who are unfortunately being thrown out. And I hate to use that word, by their employers, because their employers just consider them as, a disposable commodity. Overnight, we can no longer pay you, yalla, you can go on the street. And we've also seen that because of the pandemic, which was the tipping point of the economic crisis, there's also increased pressure on these domestic workers, including the freelancers who, were not staying in people's homes, and, who were working in different households, etc. I don't want to go into details, but my point is, the crisis we're going through now led to this, to the resumption of this debate. But unfortunately, this is a system that has existed in Lebanon and the Arab world for decades, and the abuses are not born today. At the same time, we're talking about reforms now, and the Minister of Labor has invited INGOs and UN agencies and some stakeholders. I'm not aware that the domestic workers themselves or the migrant workers are on the negotiation table, unfortunately, and the panelists can correct me if I'm wrong, to discuss reforming the Kafala system. And this is what we're going to be discussing today. Are the reforms proposed enough? Is it what we need? Do we need reforms, or do we need abolishing that system altogether? So this is a big question that we're going to be tackling tonight. So I'm going to start with my first question. Since Nizar is not here, I'm going to ask you, Rahaf. Could you please explain what is Kafala in a nutshell, especially for our foreign audience? We hear a lot the word Kafala, Kafala, Kafala. What is Kafala?
Talking with me with it. So the sponsorship system is a system that allows, that requires any migrant worker and domestic worker to come to the country to be under the sponsorship of a Lebanese employer, which means this person is only allowed to work and to stay in the country if they are working at this sponsor. So the sponsor is the employer. And this implies a lot of challenges because mainly the system is giving full power to the Lebanese employer to control the movement, the freedom, the working conditions, and even the residency of the migrant workers in the country. And of course, under the sponsorship system, which is not a law, and this is why it's also another layer of the problem. We're not talking about an article or a law that we can protest against. It's just like a system that is being imposed by the practices of gender security, by the exclusion of domestic workers from the labor law. So this is also important. Domestic workers from all nationalities, migrant Lebanese, Syrians, Palestinians, they're not considered as workers in the first place in the eyes of the Lebanese state. So this is what's also making them more vulnerable for in this system.
So you said Kafala is not a law. So are we talking about a set of administrative rules and decrees that are implemented يعني legally. Can you just describe what is Kafala?
Of course. So we're talking about different things. So one, for any non-Lebanese people to enter the country, there are different categories and they need to pass by general security. So we have migrant workers to enter the country, they need to go to a police department, not the Ministry of Labor. And this is the first problem. We have different categories of migrant workers. We have 4 categories. And luckily, we have migrant workers that come from Asian and African countries. They are not considered workers from the first and the second category. In fact, they are considered in the 4th category. And this is why the sponsorship system that we are talking about only applies to Asian and African nationalities. So we're talking about a racist system that is assuming that anyone who's coming, from example, from Ethiopia and Sudan is only allowed to work in a gas station or as a domestic worker in the house. And actually, they cannot have any independence here in Lebanon. So this is one, which means also the general security, again, and we need to highlight that they are a police department. They have full power to deport any migrant worker from the country without any specific reason. So this also means that they control the residency of migrant workers in the country. And this is what we also saw before when migrant workers started participating in a protest. There were activists who were trying to form a union. They were deported by general security simply by giving no reasons and by without any legal arguments. And we also have the exclusion of domestic workers from the labor law. So we don't see the workers as workers to be protected by the labor law. So they have to go under the sponsorship system. So change. And of course, we have the racist society, which is we cannot talk about the sponsorship system without talking about race.
Yeah, this we're gonna get more to
this is why it's.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about how this is not just a structural and an institutional problem, right? It's not only the sponsorship system that's a problem here. We've just been joined by Nizar. Marhaba, Nizar. Hello. Nice to have you with us. I think you're muted. You need to just press on the little microphone. So you're not muted anymore. So Nizar, I was asking because you were not here, and we just wanted to start by defining the sponsorship system or Kafala. And Rehaf was saying that it's a set of rules and administrative decrees that manage the work or the employment of migrant workers from specific nationalities and that are excluded from the labor law. And that it gives full power to the employer, the Lebanese employer, that system, in the sense that that person cannot go in Lebanon or out of Lebanon or leave its job without the approval of that sponsor, the Lebanese employer. Anna, my question is to you: why were was the Kafala system initially put in place, and why were the specific category of workers excluded from the labor law? And this is the question: why did we come up with this system for these people coming from Asia and Africa?
Okay, thank you. And sorry to be a little late. I think it was a little misunderstanding. So the principle of the labor law is that the legislator is taking some measures in order to give rights to employees, in order to have more balance in the relation between employees and employers. So if you want to exploit fully somebody, you don't apply the labor law. You go and you find another system, which is the sponsorship system, because it's the ideal system for more exploitation. The sponsorship system does not only facilitate committing abuses, but also it guarantees the impunity. And that's why it's the most perfect system in order to exploit someone. So, I mean, of course, for all domestic work, it's a traditional, it's from ages, because, traditionally in Lebanon, before the civil war, we were used to bring children, I mean, maybe 9, 10 years, 12 years, to work as domestic worker from poor families in the reef, in the villages. And it was considered as part of the family, and she was supposed to leave the family once she got a marriage or something. And she was, I mean, the marriage was financed by the family which was receiving her. After the war, we continue with the same principle that this lady is not protected by labor law, but she is coming this time from very far, from another country. She has no connection. She does not speak the language. So she is somebody who has no social support at all. And she is totally alone and in this country. And we apply the sponsorship system. So really, I mean, we are in front of the most efficient system in terms of exploitation. We cannot find better than this system.
I just remembered now, because you said that they used to bring children who are 9 and 10 to work before the war, and now, you know, they do that with these women. The terminologies that we use, they call them banet. Yani, the woman who is working in a house is probably 50 or 60. She's my mom or my grandma's age, and we still call her a banet, as if she's an immature adolescent person that we are, you know, fully in charge with. This is starking. I mean, the parallelism. But do you think, I mean, Rahab touched upon racism a bit. Do you think we decided to use an exploitative system for this specific category of human beings because of racist reasons, because of the way we looked, or is it because I read that it was looked upon at this labor as a temporary labor? I mean, they were not supposed to stay here for a long time. They would just come and work and go back. And so this was one of the reasons, because it's temporary labor, one of the reasons why they decided to come up with this sponsorship system. So I still need to understand, what is it? Is it racism? Is it the type of labor?
I mean, what is sure, we wanted to exploit these people, and we are bringing them to Lebanon. Once they are here, and they are subject to so poor conditions of living. They are always sequestrated in homes. They don't have any private life. They don't have any intimate relations. They are just serving us. So somehow they are no more the same human beings than us. We don't identify ourselves to them. I mean, you start having through these conditions like a kind of distinction. They are not the same than us. So I mean, after that, all kinds of racism became possible. So I mean, putting anybody in such condition will bring a priori, social a priori against them. So I mean, I think racism increased because of this kind of exploitation. Now all the domestic work in Lebanon became stigmatized somehow. Even the Palestinian and Syrian who are coming from very poor families are no more able, if you want, socially able to go and to do this type of work, because now it's related to lots of social stigma. Like, I mean, maybe this lady might be raped, might be harassed, might lose her honor or whatever. So I mean, I think I have the idea that racism increased because of this kind of exploitation. Of course, it was present before, but it became much more, because you are racist when you think that the other is so different than you. He's not thinking like you. He has not the same feelings than you. And this is what Kafala system also facilitates and make possible.
I just want to say one more thing as well, is that for the sponsorship system is also to remember that it's the way for the state to run away from the responsibilities in terms of, for example, childcare, elderly care, etc. So we want to direct all of these responsibilities to a large number of workers that definitely the reason that we are using the sponsorship system is we don't want to give them the rights. For one reason is we don't want to actually acknowledge the rights of workers, and we want to maximize the profits. How? And correct me, Nizar, if I'm wrong, but it's mainly after the civil war that we wanted to rebuild Beirut, and then that was like after the civil war that actually the sponsorship system became in Lebanon, and migrant workers. There was a need for migrant workers also to hold the whole new people and by Syrian workers that were only paid 10,000 per day. So if so, this explains the mentality of the state, because if we wanted to rebuild Beirut by actually employing Lebanese workers, we would have paid them the minimum wage and not $4 per day. So we wanted to make sure that we have that system in place to make sure that we are maximizing the profits and minimizing the expenses when rebuilding Beirut. So I think
Rahaf, I think you're breaking. I cannot hear you.
To keep the government, the Lebanese government is gaining. I'm sorry. Is it better now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So I was saying also not to forget that the Lebanese state is gaining a lot of thousands,
so there's an economic
dollars.
Your point is to summarize that there's an economic gain that started with, after the civil war. It's to maximize, and to what you said is very important, that, instead of the state being responsible for childcare, like nurseries and like helping households with that, we're putting the burden on human beings who get less than the minimum salary at under very exploitative conditions. I want to move to Dipendra now, because Dipendra worked in Lebanon as a migrant worker, and he can tell us more about his experience. Dipendra, can you hear me? You need to unmute your microphone. You're still muted. Can you tell us about your story with the sponsorship system with Kafala and Lebanon? When did you come to Lebanon, and were you a victim of abuses? Were you a victim of that system?
Yeah. Are you hearing me? Did you hear me?
Yes, we can hear.
Yeah. I went in Lebanon in 1998 as a migrant worker, and that my passport has been confiscated, and I became automatically undocumented situation. But even though I was undocumented worker, I was treated well by other people. When I worked at the hotel and restaurant sector, so treating migrant workers with the dignity and respect, it's not really required the Kafala system. It depends on the person. But because of this Kafala system, many Lebanese, many Lebanese, they're not afraid to abuse the girls, because during the investigation, I had seen that how the migrant worker treated as an inferior beginning, that is the main problem. And I became the undocumented situation, and I tried to.
You became undocumented. Why? I mean, they confiscated your passport, right? But did you leave your employer? Because just to explain to people, under the Kafala system, if a worker decides to leave their job without the consent of the sponsor, then they have to run away, between brackets, and they become undocumented, and their status becomes illegal. And even if the employer is abusing them, they become the ones who who are wanted by the authorities, because they just run away from their employers. So in your case, Dipendra, what was?
Yeah, it's a good point. When I came in Lebanon, I came as a freelancer migrant workers, and recruiter agent, he was my sponsor. And what he told me, I have to pay for him like every year, like $600 for the renewal of resident card. And then I paid him like at that time $600. So because it was a big money, because hardly ever I used to save $100 per month, because my salary was $225 per month, and I used to save $100 because I had to pay my house and lodging and food, etc. So it didn't renew my paper. So the extradition was continued until I approached to the police. He took it from me $1,800 within 2 years. And he keep promising he gonna make his paper, he gonna make my residency paper, but he did not make it. What happened? I also my employer, I mean my not the official employer, my restaurant where I used to work, my other unofficial employer, he tried to negotiate with him in order to make my paper, but he could not do because he lost the complaint on the last day of my employment, last day of my visa expired. He lost the complaint that I left his company without his knowledge. In fact, I did not leave his company. So there was a false accusation of theft against me. I discovered when I confront him in the police station. And then while I was in the investigation department, the priority was totally given to my abusive employer. And he said to me, what happened? While he's first day, he took all the statement from me. And another day, he called to my employer, I mean, a recruiting agent, I saw him all evidence. I paid money to him, but I paid him money to him. And he told me to sign on the paper, and I'm gonna transfer to the detention center. And I refused to sign the paper. I said, how come I'm gonna be in prison and then I'll sign the paper? And he took it from me on $1,800, and I was beaten at that time. So I was forced to sign on the paper. And I told him that if you need the solid evidence, I have my hotel sector. They are dealing with him, and there is a solid proof that I paid money. But the General Secretary did not listen to me. I mean, investigator did not listen to me at all.
Okay, so this is a good, I mean, we can go from here to talk more, Nizar, about the possibility of resorting to justice in case of abuse. So what we hear a lot is from domestic workers, at least as a journalist from the stories that I've reported, is, they're subjected to abuses, whether it's physical, whether it's, moral abuse. They're denied, maybe their passport is confiscated, they're sometimes not paid their salaries, and they cannot complain to anyone. And I mean, there are very few cases who go to the judiciary, who go to court and, get, justice on their side. I think a few years ago, there was a revolutionary decision by Judge Jad Malouf that gave back a passport to a domestic worker. But I mean, these are very rare instances where the judiciary in Lebanon, gives justice to these individuals. And you've already touched upon that, saying, there's no accountability mechanism. These people, they're subjected to all kinds of abuses, but they can't hold their employers accountable. So can you tell us more, Nizar, about this? You're muted. Sorry, you're muted.
Okay, I mean, we didn't define very well, or maybe you did before I came into. I mean, we didn't define very well the sponsorship system. The sponsorship system is that your contract is related to the legitimacy of your residency in Lebanon. So if you terminate the contract for whatever the reason, you might be raped, you might be not paid for long time, you might be subject to any kind of abuse, and you decide to leave, just leave the house. So you become in a legal situation, and you might be arrested, yes, interrogated, deported, even before being heard by a judge. So that is the big problem. So so we have many scenarios about what might happen in case of abuse. The first scenario is that the lady or any domestic worker would continue suffering the abuses in order to be able to remain in Lebanon, because she or he knows very well that if they leave the house, they might be deported. So they might lose the possibility of revenue. So in this case, no recourse, of course. She will be just accepting the abuses and adapting herself as long as she can with the abuses. And I can say that it's the biggest majority of people who are suffering are in this case, so suffering in silence. The second one is that she decides just to run away. She say, I mean, this is our conditions that I cannot accept at all, so I'm going to run away. And since she is, I mean, she wants to stay in Lebanon and to get revenues, she is going to work in the as illegal
black market, yeah,
worker and the black market. In this case, she does not go to court because she just wants to make herself invisible and not to be seen by the authorities.
And we have around 20,000, I think, if not.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a big number.
People who are in this status.
The third case, she goes to the embassy or to Caritas or to RM, any other organization, Kafala, and she asks for help for judicial aid. And then there is a claim made against the employer. This is the only case where you can find claims. So what happens after? What happens after? I mean, she is taken to the general security. They might appeal for the employer, and they will tell her, if you want to continue prosecuting this guy, you will lose the possibility to stay in Lebanon because he will not waive his right as sponsor on you. So you can no more go and work with another employer. So if you want him to accept that you go to work for another employer, you should sign a discharge, or you should waive your rights on your previous employer. Otherwise, you will be deported. So in lots of cases, we have this compromise where the lady is waiving her rights against the waiver of sponsorship right in order to be able to go to work with another employer. In this third case, also there is no justice. There is just a waiver. The fourth case, she insists on her case. She say, no, I want him to be punished. Then she is deported. And the judge is just having a file without having the human being which suffered behind this file. Right. And she is not heard by the judge. She has no opportunity to go and to tell her story. And that's why we don't have a judicial narrative about miseries and abuses. And in all four cases I just mentioned, there is no justice, there is no recourse to justice, and it's much related to the sponsorship system as mechanism. That's why I said in the beginning, it's not only a system which facilitates abuse, but it's a system which guarantees impunity.
I think it fascinates me that how securitized this commitment, instead of resorting to the Ministry of Labor, which is, or any other ministerial institution, we're talking about general security, we're talking about the police. There's a security approach to these workers that is just insane. I mean, any work should not be under the umbrella of security, but under, the umbrella of labor, I don't know what other ministry. It's just insane. Rahab, you wanted to add something, or you had a question?
Just to say that, first of all, the workers, another challenge for people not being able to hold their abusers accountable is one, many people cannot even leave their house, so they don't even have access to actually go to any embassy or to any NGO or to actually even go to the police station. So this is one. Yes. Exactly. Number two is that people know that general security are not someone to trust, because in many cases, even if a worker goes to the general security, the first question will be asked is, where is your sponsor? And they rarely listen to her, if ever. And what they do, they actually call the employer. And this is why when we get reports of abuses of domestic workers, for example, on the street, the first thing we tell people is do not call general security, because they will put her back in the employer's house. Why? Because they always take for granted the word of the Lebanese versus the word of a migrant worker. And this is why we have many...
You're breaking again.
Talking about hundreds of migrant workers who are detained by general. They stole from my house. Migrant workers detained because they were accused of theft, with no evidence, with no proof, nothing. It just takes for Lebanese employer to say, she stole $1,000 from my house, and this is enough for her to be in.
I think we lost Rahaf. We cannot hear her anymore. Sorry about that. It might be her connection. Dipendra, do you want to add? I mean, you
and also I meant to mention, like, if a migrant worker is coming to the court, it's through an NGO who has.
Rahaf, we keep losing you. Okay. Yes. Yeah, we're losing you. We can't hear anything.
Sorry, I can't do anything.
It's okay. Maybe it will get better. So let me go to Dipendra. Dipendra, your platform, This is Lebanon, has been a voice. Has been given a voice to domestic workers who are abused. Can you tell us about? Do you know of any case of someone who tried to resort to justice, was deported? What happens? Do they come to you? They I've seen that they report abuses to you just like they do now to other entities.
Yeah, since my personal experience, not only as migrant workers, I had served also in diplomatic level. I had myself filed the case more than 1,000 Nepalese girls while I was in Lebanon. So what happened there, even there is a Kafala system, if there is a if general security will make fear investigation, there will be justice, but hardly ever we can find such an investigator. So there are the truths that have been hidden over the past several years, and the truths are not revealing, like abusive employers and dirty secret were hidden under the rug. Because of that situation, the number of abuse cases have been increased in Lebanon. That's
okay, sorry, your point is they were not talking about the abuses, and so the abuses increased, but your platform started talking about the abuses, right?
Abuses, yeah. And like example, I used to talk sometime with the Caritas Lebanon. It's not fears that what we are collaborating with the General Secretary. We as a human rights organization, we have to reveal the truth. And what the Caritas intention is, we cannot reveal the truth. If we reveal the truth, we're gonna be kicked out from the General Security. And that's why the truth are hidden. And when I start to reveal the truth while I was in Lebanon, it's the beginning of the 2012, and immediately I received a phone call from the director of the Caritas, and she threatened me. If I keep talking about what is happening migrant worker situation, I will face deportation. Yeah. So what I have to finally, thanks God that I came in Canada, and I was collaborating with other friends how to establish like website, like a non-profit organization, so that we can reveal the truth. In fact, This is Lebanon was created to report the abuse of the migrant workers, but it's automatically became hotline for the migrant workers. So as soon as we receive the case, we directly communicate with the employer, but 50% problem has been resolved. You can see on our Facebook page that abusers, the perpetrators of abuse are exposed.
By resolved, what do you mean? Like, are usually these workers repatriated? They're back home. They've left Lebanon. Are they, or are you in touch with them when they're still with their employers? And when you say resolved, what, like salary paid, abuses stopped?
We're beginning able to the threats of exposing on our Facebook page is often we are beginning able to convince the abusive employer to pay the old salaries and to release the girls, and we have been successfully resolving problem since we established, but there are 50% we couldn't resolve the problem. What I can tell you, This is Lebanon, we are beginning able to resolve the problem better than in a diplomatic way.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I just want to tell people that some employers have, tried to shut down your website and your Facebook page many times. Unfortunately, thinking that.
Yeah, that is because let me tell you why it's happened. The abuser, we discovered very prominent Lebanese family, well-known doctors and lawyers and celebrity, and they're well educated people. And we expose on our Facebook, and that brought to the attention of the nation. And that's why the judiciary immediately send or emergency send to block our website.
Yeah, I want to say that your work is important because unfortunately, I mean, I'm a journalist. The local media is not doing enough when it comes to reporting on abuses and on the kafala system. It's very occasional, and I mean, they wait for someone to commit suicide. I mean, for those who don't know, the suicide numbers are staggering. We're talking about on average 1 to 2 suicides per week, which is a clear sign that there's a big problem when it comes to the sponsorship system. And so I think having online platforms like this who are naming and shaming people, is somehow, could lead to accountability. Unfortunately, not always, but what we need accountability through the judiciary, through state institutions, and not just, through an online platform. We need something that's structural and sustainable. Nizar and Rahaf, I mean, whoever wants to answer this question. As I said earlier, now there's a resurgence in the debate about kafala. And we're hearing a lot of voices, decrying this system. And the Ministry of Labor has said that, it's working on reforming the sponsorship system. I remember that in 2009, the Ministry of Labor worked on a unified contract with INGOs. And now our Ministry of Labor is saying, we're working on a unified contract, although there's clearly one from 2009, and most of the time it's not being implemented. So why are we still talking about reforming this system? Is reforming enough, or do we need to abolish kafala and just put these people under the labor law just like any workers? So Rahaf, Nizar, well, this is for both of you. So Nizar, do you want to start, and then Rahaf will pick up from there? You're muted. Nizar muted.
You have always to remind me. Maybe Rahaf would like to say something before me, or?
Yeah, go ahead, Rahaf.
Okay. I just want to say that this standard unified contract that was done a few years ago is not even a proper contract that any one of us would accept to sign it and work under it. Because what is a contract if at least they don't give the right for a worker to quit her job? In the standard unified contract, that a domestic worker was given the right to quit her job only if she can prove that she was abused sexually or physically, if she was able to prove that she was not paid for 3 months in a row, if she was able to prove that she was forced to work outside her employer's house. So all of these abuses keep happening, and still the state wants to have a proof for any of these cases to accept that the domestic worker is not a runaway and is actually quitting her job. So there's a fundamental problem with the contract. This is why that we cannot keep talking about the reform. Even now, if the Ministry of Labor, they want to actually do something good, I don't know why, to be honest. If you ask me why they are doing, maybe they're just trying to respond to the current debate on the kafala system, which is great. Okay, you want to do that, but let's not say that actually reforming a contract is enough to solve the problem. We are talking about the need and the immediate need to actually abolish a system that is legalizing modern slavery. As simple as that. So why would I have to go actually and find different ways to protect a worker when I can simply include her in the labor law, and I can simply say that she has all the rights and she has the right to the minimum wage? Will the contract give her a minimum wage? No, she will still get paid $150 for a month. Will the contract give her, for example, the freedom to actually work outside her house? Will the contract give mechanism complaint being put in place? No, it's not giving any of this. So how can we have this bigger umbrella that is the sponsorship system, and then I want to say to someone, actually, I give you this contract, but there's no implementation in place to actually give you the right to hold someone accountable, the abuser accountable. So anything, to be honest, anything that is done to change the sponsorship system, for me, it's important and it's needed. Whether shaming, whether actually reforming the contra, but let's not say that this is the solution. Like, we really know that we need to abolish the sponsorship system. Can we talk about a different system? Sure, but let's talk about simply including domestic workers in the labor law and making sure that general security don't have extreme power over migrant workers. Let's make sure we don't have abusive agencies that are trafficking migrant workers to come to the country. So let's talk about all of these, and then when we solve all of these problems, let's talk about the kind of contracts that we want to make to protect the workers. So for me, the standard unified contract, it might give protection for like 1%, 2% of the workers, but this is it. This is why we cannot say that this is enough at all.
Nizar, if you want to add, to that, and I have another question is, why we don't want to abolish the system? I mean, we spoke about economic benefits and racism, and I mean, today, why aren't they talking about abolishing a system? Why are we still, the minister used the word, and I'll quote her, tafkik, like a gradual dismantling of a system. But I don't think the situation can wait anymore.
Okay, let me answer before the previous question, because I think there are two different problems. The first problem, do we have enough norms which regulate this relation between employers and employee? Do we have norms which make in such way, which have as result to have better balance between no, we don't have, since labor law is excluding them. So we have just the contract law, which is, there is nothing specific about this type of relation. So all the idea of the unified contract is to have on the table some new norms, some specific norms to deal with the termination, with this kind of thing. So this is the first problem, where they are trying to find something. Before, they were trying to have a new law, not only a contract. Now nobody is thinking anymore about the law. They always use this contract, and they review the contract, and each review of contract takes many years. So it's really everybody wants to give the feeling that they are doing something, they are going to do something, but actually it's really very minimal with all the misery which happening. The second issue is the implementation of norms. So you have some norms, you have some regulation, but how it will be implemented? So the contract is not answering this at all, and does not give you any way to implement these norms. So you are relying on the morality of the employer again, that they will be more respectful to norms when they are written. But otherwise, I don't see in the 4 cases I just enumerated where the contract might improve their condition at all, in no way, because the sponsorship system will have as a result to deport the lady, or to put her in an irregular and illegal situation once she leaves the house, and so on. So to answer your question, why we don't remove? Because simply, I mean, we would like to exploit people. I mean, that was the evil contract made between the power in Lebanon, which was the crook power, the corrupt power, and the people. I mean, we are stealing the money from the state, and you will have all the possibility in your private sphere to do whatever you want. You can bring people from foreign country and exploit them as you. So everybody in Lebanon starts talking about the right to have a domestic worker. That happens nowhere in the world. We become a very arrogant country. I mean, a right to have a domestic worker, where it exists. I remember once we were at the Ministry of Labor, and we were talking about increasing the tax of bringing somebody in order to reduce the number of people who came to Lebanon. And even the officials at the Ministry of Labor were contesting and saying, no, no, we want to provide each Lebanese the possibility to bring someone. Now this is no more existing. Nobody, there are lots of families now which are no more able to bring people to work for them. So now I think I want to believe that not only removing the sponsorship system became a legal or a right necessity, but also it became an economic argument, because we can no more bring foreigners from outside. We can no more transfer dollars outside Lebanon. We become a poor country, and we have to say it again. So, so now all this regulation of work and making in such way that exploiting a foreigner is becoming much more expensive should be the case. And when I say more expensive, that means that it should be a more balanced relation, a relation where the wage is very high, or at least there is a tax, a very high tax to pay in order to bring someone. So it should be limited to some number of families, and the state should discourage those families from bringing people from outside and encourage them to recruit people from Lebanon. And this might change totally the sponsorship system, which become no more convenient to the economic situation in Lebanon.
Very good point. But to touch on the demand, I don't think the demand is only coming from Lebanon. I think the countries who are exporting these people are also part of this system. I mean, some of them recently banned their their citizens from coming to the Arab world. But I mean, I've covered many stories, and I've tried to deal with the Ethiopian embassy and representatives here, sometimes, other nationalities. And it feels like the countries also need to, they also have an economic benefit in sending these people here, because they're sending money back. These are maybe governments who are unable to offer these people jobs in their countries where unemployment rates are high. So I feel like part of the problem is the demand that exists in Asia and Africa, and that will always exist. And I don't know if, Dipendra, you want to say anything about that. Do you think like Nepal or the Philippines or Ethiopia or other countries, they're also encouraging people and they're benefiting from the Kafala system?
Yeah, there are like 95% migrant workers have come to Lebanon under the false promises. If you really tell them the truth, hardly ever they will come. Like in Nepal, hardly ever you will find Nepalese citizens who is working in Lebanon. What happened? We completely stopped. Except Nepalese, all migrant workers could come in Lebanon and can work in Lebanon. But Nepalese General Secretary will have stopped issuing visas since beginning of the 2012, because we work very seriously on this issue. Because General Secretary, the Lebanese government sanctioned the Lebanese government enforced and sanctioned the slavery system in Lebanon. But if you really tell them this truth, what will happen if in case of abuse? The girls will run away. There will be false complaints against her. If you tell them really truth and reality, hardly ever the migrant worker will come to the Lebanon.
So for those who are asking questions, please, all the questions need to go into the Q&A box and not in the chat box, so I can filter them, and we'll just go over them in a few minutes. So the road to abolishing kafala, and this is a question to all three speakers on the panel, starts, from what I understand, by simply abolishing the system and putting these workers under the labor law with specific work visas. But there's another point which Nizar has brought, which is also discouraging the demand for foreign labor, because our economic reality does not allow that. And maybe we should start, a new type of demand encouraging this kind of work, whether it's in homes or hospitality, etc., from the local workforce. There's also, I think, the issue of racism and education in general, which is, even if we abolish kafala and we still have migrant workers, there will still be abuses because of the way we look at these people and we don't consider them as equal to us. So what else am I missing here? So because the panel today is about the road to abolishing kafala, and this is the last question I have for you. What is the road to abolish kafala? Where do we start tomorrow? Nizar?
Okay. I mean, in 2012, when Charbel Nahas was Minister of Labor, there was really very serious work in order to change all laws and regulations in order to have a better employment system for kafala. And this work was done by ILO, mainly by consultants of ILO, and I was able to participate in this. And I know that it's a work which was done. So everything regarding amending the labor law, amending the regulation about immigration, and so on. So we just need to go back to these documents and to start regulating if we have political will to do something. And this is, so we have to stop reviewing this uniform contract. I mean, it's a waste of time. I mean, we should go much further. We are now, we can say that Lebanon now is much involved in trafficking because of this, in forced labor. And I have to remind everybody that there is an anti-trafficking law since 2011 in Lebanon. Until now, there is not one case regarding domestic workers about trafficking or forced labor. So that means, again, that the main problem is about implementing the law, is not only about the laws. And it might not be implemented very well as far as the domestic workers are deported before having the possibility to go and to see a judge. I would like to add maybe one thing that, okay, I say it later if we have time.
Okay, I have a lot of questions, so we need to move to questions. Do you want to add anything? The road to abolishing kafala starts with what?
I just do think that it comes from we need to work on, of course, the legal level and the policy level, but of course we need to work on the mentality. And by this, I will try to answer some of the questions mentioned here. So when we say that there is a system that is a sponsorship system that is being allowed by racism, let's just remember that when we talk about racism, we're not just talking about racism against people against migrant domestic workers. We have in Lebanon also racism against Syrians and against Palestinians. So yes, of course, we need to work on our mentality, and we need to make sure that we do shaming, that we do discussions, that we do whatever it takes, that we start from schools, that we start from our own families to really change this mentality and to say that no, we cannot keep surviving in a country that is being racist to thousands of people that are themselves building the country itself. So this is one. Two, we need to work on the policy level, of course. This, I do think they both come in hand. I don't know what to say in terms of, okay, what can we start with? But I know that anything that we do is needed. So let's start by actually talking about agencies, as someone said. Let's talk about actually changing the power of the general security. Let's talk about advocating on including domestic workers in the labor law. So all of this will lead to changing to the sponsorship system. but it doesn't go anywhere if we're not ready to actually acknowledge our racism and how we can actually change it from our own houses. So one of the different questions we're asking how we can support, how they can,
Yeah, we've asked the question now. I will go over the questions, the ones that have been asked a few times, and those that I think are relevant and haven't been touched upon. Dipendra, do you want to say anything quickly? What is in your opinion? The road to abolishing kafala. Do you have an opinion about that?
Yeah, unless the kafala system abolishes, the migrant worker will be treated as an inferior beginning in the during the investigation, because I know that most of the abusive employer, they are very well educated, they are perfectly aware of that migrant worker are not treated as well even in the during the investigation, and they know that they can do whatever they want. So when they understand this one, so the migrant workers are really in a vulnerable situation, and that's where the problem will be always remains, because Lebanese government enforce the sanction and Lebanese government enforce the slavery deficit in Lebanon.
So you are saying abolishing the system is the solution. We need to get rid.
There is no other way that the migrant worker will be protected.
Okay, I'm going to go over the questions now. There's a question that's been recurring a lot. So a lot of our listeners tonight are Lebanese living abroad. So they're part of the diaspora. They're asking, what can the Lebanese diaspora do to help with this issue? So Rahaf, Nizar, do you want to answer?
I don't know. I mean, they are diaspora, most of them, because the country is not well. I mean, because the economic situation is not well, because we were governed by corrupt people. I mean, and so any now concept how the Lebanese society might evolve, might be better, might improve. I mean, this kind of thoughts is, I mean, we should now have a normal society. A society where people do all kinds of jobs, where we don't exploit people coming from other countries, where we have the same respect for those who are ministers and those who are working just as domestic work. I mean, this kind of aesthetic, how we conceive our new society, our new Lebanon, which will emerge from this crisis, I mean, this is much needed. And I think the diaspora should also participate in making this concept a reality. And when we talk about it, and so that comes with lots of humanitarian feelings, with lots of all this kind about the respect of law, about the respect of equality, and all these kinds of.
Someone is asking if they can ask their governments where they live to put pressure on Lebanon to abolish the kafala system. What do you think about that?
I mean,
foreign pressure.
I mean, I hope that, I mean, I think always that any improvement in any society should come from people living in this society before. So, I mean, before talking about the pressure from outside, we should talk about how to improve our public debate. And I think now through social media, even if you are living in the diaspora, you can participate easily to the debate in Lebanon through social media and so on. So I need all of us, and those who are living in Europe or other, and who are familiar with the humanitarian values, and they know how to respect others and so on. I think they have a very important role to play in this public debate in order to conceive a new society for Lebanon.
Okay, there's a question also that I'm going to try to answer here. How can Lebanese contribute from abroad, as in donate to organization? Preferred method to transfer, I mean, we're not going to go into this, but there are organizations that you can help. There's an organization of Ethiopian domestic workers that's been very active recently. They've been helping, a lot of domestic workers who've been put on the street with food. They're cooking for them. They're helping them. They're called Enyalenya, so it's EGNALEGNA. You can also get in touch with Dipendra, see how you can help him and his platform, anti-racism movement, and other INGOs who are, and local NGOs. I mean, I know Kafa has a hotline and they help victims of abuse among domestic workers. So you can get in touch with these organizations and see how you can help. Someone is asking about the agencies that bring workers to Lebanon. We know that they're part of the Kafala system, and probably they're one of the most, the biggest beneficiaries of the system, because they make a lot of money in commissions on the, bringing these people. And so someone is asking, why isn't anyone monitoring them? Why isn't anyone doing anything about these agencies and, holding them accountable? Because, they're part of that slavery and that trafficking line.
Yeah, mainly because of corruption. Those people are part of the system. They got their license because they are close to this leader or to the other leader. And yeah, so that means that they are very well protected also. So you had many report on abuses, but they never been, there are very little cases where they were prosecuted. And also lots of cases were subject to trafficking or something like this.
Okay, and just to stay with you, Nizar, I think there's a misunderstanding here, because at the beginning we asked what kafala was, and I think they have said it was not a law. So some people here are asking, if it's not a law, then maybe the system itself is illegal, and if it's not a law, then how can we have an accountability system to go with it? My understanding is that kafala is a system of like a set of rules and administrative regulations, right?
Yeah, administrative regulation adopted by the General Security, which is responsible of implementing the immigration laws. So that's why, once you terminate your contract in whatever way, you are subject to deportation. You are considered as living in an illegal condition in Lebanon, so you can be arrested, interrogated, deported, even before having the possibility to go a judge. So this is what the General Security is doing. And I remember very well a few years ago, the special rapporteur from UN about trafficking came to Lebanon. And every time she was going to the Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Labor, the Parliament, asking about domestic workers. And always the answer was, you have to go to the General Security and to and in her report, she said that it's amazing. In this country, like if all politicians are making like if they have no responsibility at all in this matter, and everything is delegated to the General Security. So that makes the General Security makes now lots of regulation. They have a set of regulation, very, very, very developed, very sophisticated. And it's like a kingdom or a state within the state. About all the Syrian, Palestinian, and foreigners in general.
Rahaf, there's a question from Fatima, which says, how willing do you think is the Lebanese community to let go of their comfort for the sake of others, especially the generation that created this system?
Okay. Well, I think we can start by saying it's not a matter of a comfort or not. It's a matter of us giving the rights of thousands of domestic workers and migrant workers. So this is why we can think of a system after the sponsorship system. Like, are we talking about affordable childcare and elderly care? So this is one. Are we talking about a system that makes sure that the rights of the domestic workers are there regardless if she stays in the house of the employer or not? So I don't think it's a discussion of how much the Lebanese society are willing to let go of their comfort, because clearly they're not ready. And this is why they were protecting the system. This is why they didn't even want to talk about the rights of domestic workers and migrant workers. And this is why even till now, when they wanted their own comfort, they are like literally throwing domestic workers out on the streets in front of their embassies, or even locking them in the houses, not paying salaries, not even. So there's not enough readiness from the Lebanese society to act, of course. So this is why the discussion should not be the comfort of the employers. It's more the rights of the workers, and this is what we need to stress on. I just want to mention one small thing regarding the question of how Lebanese living outside they can support. I just want to say that any kind of donations or fundraising, because many domestic workers want to go back to their country, but they cannot afford the tickets and they cannot afford the penalty fees. We are already, like many groups and organizations are doing a lot of advocacy to make sure that we waive the penalty fees imposed by General Security on migrant workers that are not regular. But the tickets, they are like many domestic workers, and we're talking about thousands of people who want to go back to their country, but they can't. So any kind of fundraising to support the efforts that are being done in terms of supporting with tickets or supporting with food, or even supporting with shelters, because also many migrant workers are facing the threat of eviction, are actually being blocked out, are on the streets because they can no longer afford to pay the rent. So I think this is.
If you can, at the end, add a link or a contact or something to share with the people who are still here, in case they want to get in touch and see how they can help.
Yes.
Nizar, there's a question: and is the Bar Association playing an active role in abolishing Kafala system in Lebanon? I feel like I want to laugh, but go ahead.
You give the answer.
It's the Bar Association. I mean, unfortunately, our own lawyers are part of the system, and they probably employ domestic workers through Kafala. And Dipendra knows, and he's exposed lawyers who are abusers of domestic workers. So being a lawyer or in the Bar Association, unfortunately, in Lebanon has not.
Honestly, to be fair, this might change also. You know that most of the legal aid provided by the Bar Association is directly financed by Europe, by the European Union. Okay. So this should be a condition. There should be some condition that at least 20 or 30% of this legal aid should go to lawyers working on domestic workers. But the problem, what they can do in such system? Do we have enough lawyers to bring, if you want, advocacy cases? That means cases which might have some impact, which might change the system, or all the work they are going to do is really how to make a compromise with the employer within the same system. So it needs also training for lawyers in order to be more proactive, more offensive, if you want, in implementing the law and enforcing the change within the law. So something happened recently. For example, we had always in mind that the most important thing is to bring cross-border litigation. That means if really the main hindrance about impunity is the fact that the domestic workers are deported, let's make in such sort that the judge will be able to hear them even in their home country.
Abroad.
Exactly, and this is what we call the cross-border litigation. That means once a domestic worker, abused domestic worker, leaves the country and went back to her country, she can make a power attorney to a lawyer who will ask the judge to hear her and to register the narrative of this domestic worker about what happened in Lebanon. This is very important. I think for any change, this kind of narrative in the judiciary record is bringing lots of information. So with Corona, we start having this kind of interrogation within Lebanon, but it was online interrogation, online investigation. So we think there is now
not for a domestic
law
for other cases
to apply this on domestic workers.
Yes. Dipendra, someone is asking if you've ever received help or support from religious institutions.
Yeah, while I was detained, one First Baptist Bible Church who helped me financially and sponsored me while I was
Okay.
in Lebanon in 2002. Without, if there was no church, I would not have been released from the jails and work on behalf of migrant workers.
All right, thank you. I think there's a question for Rahaf, and this is the last question. Rahaf, you talked, this is from Linouche. You talked earlier about different categories of foreign workers coming to Lebanon, the African and Asian being the fourth. Is it possible to have more details about the other categories and what are the differences?
I think maybe Nizar can elaborate more on these categories, but for example, it depends if you're coming as a CEO, for example, this is the first category. If you're coming to work as an employee in a company, this is another category. But if you're coming as, like, the fourth category is a category by itself, which is the domestic work category. But I do think that Nizar can better share better details on this. Nizar?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't hear the question. I mean, so if
They
you
are
can
asking
repeat it.
about the four categories of workers coming to Lebanon.
Foreign workers.
So we have highly qualified people is the first category. The second category, less qualified but still important. And the third is for the low wage, for only men. And the fourth category is the low wages for women. And for the third and fourth categories, they are not allowed to bring their families to Lebanon. So they are allowed just to come there by themselves. And now we have a big problem if ever they get a family in Lebanon. And maybe, Rahaf, you remember once, I mean, the General Security asked all the public notary to force the employers to sign an undertaking that these ladies who are engaged and recruited as domestic workers will not have any relation with any other guy and so on. And this made a lot of debate also in Lebanon. And by then, the Ministry of Justice said it's illegal. So, but I mean, just to give you an idea about how to control the private life of these domestic workers, they become, we treat them like if they are just machines here. They don't have any human dimension.
Yeah. I mean, I said this at the beginning. We look at them as a service, as a disposable commodity, not as human beings who are equal, who have the right to live, to love, to marry, to have a private life, to have a break. I mean, some people who employ domestic workers don't even give them a day off. I mean, just look in the mirror and ask yourself, would you accept that for yourself, for your children, for your family? It's just, it's insane.
The most progressive people, they ask for 1 day as a leave, but I don't understand why somebody who finish his work with on daily basis, he might go out. I mean, this is normal. He might go and live elsewhere, but all this is not allowed in Lebanon.
Yes, the stay in, the live in is a big problem because it blurs the lines between the professional life and the private life. Okay, I mean, thank you for joining us tonight. I think that's it, unless any of you, the three speakers on our panel, want to add, to say a final message about Kafala. Are you hopeful? Maybe is my question. Is there any hope, any light at the end of the tunnel? Just a few words, each one of you, and then we can wrap it up.
Yeah, I would like to say one thing.
Yes.
If in Lebanon, there are enough lawyers to work on behalf of migrant workers. I mean, there are several lawyers who are working at the Caritas, and there are so many social workers they have been working. But if they keep working under the Kafala system, it's very hard to change the abolish system. It's very hard to abolish the Kafala system. The problem, there is a well-connected organization who works hand-to-hand at the General Secretary. In fact, they're not willing to change the Kafala system. They would like to keep this Kafala system. It is so sad.
Okay, so I think what Dipendra is touching upon is a lot of organizations, and I've come across a few who claim to be working on helping migrant domestic workers and to be working against Kafala, but they're actually part of the system, and somehow directly or indirectly, they are just reinvigorating, and they want that system to be in place because they're benefiting.
Yeah, like they have mentioned on their website, they have the human rights organization, but in fact they are the part of the general security of the Kafala system.
I mean, unfortunately, this is an experience I've had with Caritas, and I'm happy if someone wants to report that to them. But I worked on a story, and I filmed someone in one of their shelters, and then I tried to get in touch with her because she asked me to try and connect her with her brother in Ethiopia, and they refused to let me talk to her, and I could no longer get in touch with her. The woman just disappeared. I would call and they would tell me she was moved to another shelter. Recently, when the Ethiopian women were queuing outside the embassy here in Lebanon, I heard colleagues of mine saying that when they went to the Caritas shelter, their phones were confiscated. And this is a big question. I don't know why.
That is true. Yeah, it's true.
This has happened. And again, I'm reporting what I heard. So I think your point is, organizations who want to work on the rights of migrant domestic workers, on abolishing Kafala, should start, with their own practices and the way they
have to work as a human rights organization. And they have to stop also the intimating other activists and migrant workers who really voice out on behalf of migrant workers.
Rahaf, do you want to end with a message of hope, or you're not hopeful?
No, I think we should always be hopeful. I think this is the way to survive the daily struggles that we are facing. But what I want to say is that just to keep in mind, we didn't have time to actually tackle the impact of the economic crisis on migrant workers and domestic workers, because this is another layer of just hell that is facing domestic workers and migrant workers in Lebanon. And it's also allowed by racism and by the sponsorship system. So right now, many changes are happening. Workers are leaving the country. People can no longer afford domestic work. So we really don't know. Maybe the system is falling by itself. So we really need to wait for a few months to see how it goes, actually. So let's see. And this is something that we never anticipated or expected or even thought of before, like a few months before. But what we know for sure is that the situation of domestic workers and migrant workers is even worse than before. Like talking about people starving to death, about people actually being trapped, about people like facing more abuses with little action, and also like with zero action. So knowing everything that we are witnessing every single day, hopeful is just a word that we might not want to use, but at the same time we are seeing a lot of community groups and community activists such as Enya Lenya, Masawat, the Cameroonian communities that are doing amazing work on pressuring their embassies. We are seeing different embassies that are taking action, such as the Nigerian embassy, for example, and Filipino embassy. So I think these are what are giving hope to many workers that really don't know what they're awaiting.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that the system might be crumbling because of the economic system is crumbling, because we've been speaking about Kafala for decades and about the abuses, and we never expected it to maybe come to an end because of economic reasons. But I mean, that's still to be seen. We don't know. Nizar, anything you want to end with?
I just want to say that it's highly political issue. It's not only humanitarian. It's not right-based issue. It's really political. How we conceive our society. Do we accept to continue this way, that all Lebanese are leaving the country to work abroad because there is no possibility, no opportunity in Lebanon, and will bring in exchange as many people as those who immigrated? I mean, we are talking about diaspora with diaspora now. I mean, they left the country because there is no economic opportunity, and we are bringing people to work here. So it's totally and it's not a normal society anymore. I mean, that's why it's very political now to decide about how we want Lebanon to be in the future. And one of the main aspects, how we want to deal with foreigners and with the work conditions in Lebanon, with the economy also. So all this brings this issue into the center of the public debate. And I am of those who believe that because we have this big crisis in Lebanon, that we are forced now to think and to bring answers to those very important questions. Thank you.
Yeah, this is why I'm saying it's unfortunate, because we were supposed to, discuss abolishing the system from, I think, a rights perspective, because it's just so abusive. But now we're put under the economic pressure, and so the debate is on the table again. And I agree with you that this is really a political and a vision that we are lacking. What vision do we want for Lebanon? And now that we're in a deep crisis, when we're going to rebuild this country, how are we going to rebuild the economy, and what part is foreign labor going to play in that economy? And that is going to be, determine what, whether the Kafala or any other alternative system will be in place, and how dependent are we going to be on foreign labor for domestic work. So it's really about the political and economic vision that we have for Lebanon, and remodeling everything that we've put in place, because it's simply not working and it has ceased to work. Thank you, Rahaf, Nizar, and Dipendra for joining us tonight. And those who are still here, thank you for joining our discussion. Thank you, Impact Lebanon, Lebanese Diaspora, and Action and Meghterbin Mejtemiin for, allowing us to have this conversation and this discussion. And that's it for me. I enjoyed this, and I hope things will get better.
Thank you, Dalal.
Thank you.
Good night. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.